I am joined today by Frank DiCola of Game Revenant, and we are going to be having a discussion, or I'm going to hopefully let Frank do most of the discussing because he's the guy with all the data, um, about what premium games really make. And all this came about from a panel that Frank led at this year's PAX East, which I was lucky enough to catch most of. I don't often get to catch panels as media at PAX. Usually I'm too busy. But I thought it was a really interesting discussion, and it wasn't recorded, so I talked with Frank, and he's going to give us a kind of abridged version of that panel, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Quick and dirty on his findings with their game Where Shadows Slumber, which, by the way, there will be a link to if any of what he's talking about piques your interest. You should go check it
Thank you.
out. So, Frank, first, thank you for agreeing to talk with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. Um, I am going to shut up and let you start and tell the story of Where Shadows Slumber. This is about a 6 month period that we're talking about, correct?
Yes, so maybe even a bit more.
Yeah.
At this point, the 6 month anniversary would have been March 20th, I guess. I'll just say, I don't know when people are actually watching this. So we launched September 20th, 2018.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
you do the math on iOS, and then we launched on Android November 20th, 2018.
Perfect.
So there was that gap too. But yeah, so as Jacob said, my name is Frank. I'm the artist on the game Where Shadows Slumber, and I'm the CEO of my studio. It's just me, Game Revenant. And yeah, so worked on Where Shadows Slumber with Jack Kelly, my friend, for 3.5, 4 years. It was a big, our biggest project to date. We met in college. We knew we wanted to do games together. We did a few student projects. We made a mobile endless runner called Skyrunner. And then sometime around 2014, Monument Valley came out, and we had finished Skyrunner. And Jack kind of had this idea like, oh man, what if we took the beautiful aesthetics and the simplicity of Monument Valley, and we blended it with some of this weird thing he was working on that had to do with like shadows and light and strange physics. And so I know this isn't really about the game itself, but just to give an overview.
Sure.
It's a mobile game, Where Shadows Slumber. It's a puzzle adventure game. You play as a little dude carrying a lantern. Wherever he walks, the light goes with him, and he casts really bright light, really dark shadows. The shadows are the mechanic of how you solve puzzles in the game. And so every time the shadows will kind of sweep over something in the world, they can change the next time you see them. So it's sort of like that effect in Jason Bourne movies where they're looking for Jason Bourne and he's walking on the street and they're like, there he is. And then a bus passes by. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A bus passes by and he's gone. We're like, oh, we lost him. We lost him, director.
It's a really cool mechanic. Not to like,
Yeah.
Like you said, we're not focusing on the game, but I can vouch.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
really cool puzzle mechanic.
Right. So it's that as a game. And so I want to talk about the marketing strategy we made early on, because that's going to have echoes for what happened now. When we were designing that, we had Monument Valley in mind, and we said, isn't it cool that this is a mobile game where you just pay $5 and you get the game? I forget what the launch price of Monument Valley was at the time, but like Monument Valley 2, $5. Okay, yeah, you just buy it, you get the game. They did DLC. But I mean, even 4 years ago, it was clear that the mobile marketplace was really scummy. There were a lot of these games that really felt more like work. For example, all right, I don't want to get you in trouble if I mention other games. Is it okay if I mention other games?
Mention other games. If it's a problem, I'll bleep it.
Yeah, I'm currently playing Elder Scrolls Blades because I'm a huge Elder Scrolls fan. But the game itself, I kind of figured it out. I'm in the early access, and it's like, I get it. Like, you figure out at a certain point how to work on the game to get the loot, but then you think to yourself, like, I'm not enjoying this, Like,
It's a chore.
It's a chore, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm playing that, and I'm also playing the Fire Emblem, whichever one they came out that had both characters, Alm and Celica. God, now I forget the name. It was one of the recent ones. They kind of like re-released it. So it's like I'm comparing those experiences, and it's like, well, here's a game I bought that I'm just enjoying all the time, and here's a free game that is demanding a lot of my time and feels like work. So clearly, with Where Shadows Slumber, we wanted to go in the direction of premium. Just buy the game, get the game. That's it. And so this presentation, so that was 4 years ago, right? Then we stuck with that the whole time. People told us like, oh, you're crazy, don't do that, that's not what the market is. And we knew that, but we also said like, we just want to try this. Like we kind of went into it knowing like, okay, we're sort of driving into a brick wall, but like maybe the car goes through the brick wall. Like maybe we don't
Maybe,
right?
maybe.
You're not, so I think like we weren't totally naive. We had just really committed to this. And in fairness to us, the game we designed wasn't the kind of game that we could sort of pivot and say suddenly like, oh, actually, let's stuff it full of ads or loot boxes, right? It's not that kind of game. It's not a repeatable experience. You just play through the story the way you would play like God of War story or The Last of Us. So we stuck with that the whole time. That's still the model. And we launched September 20th, 2018 on the App Store first because we had heard that that was like a better way to get noticed by Apple, and then Android 2 months later. So it sort of had a brief exclusive window. And so it was bittersweet. Apple knew the game was coming. We had sort of warned them ahead of time with some of the like early things you can tell them, like fill out their developer forms, email them and stuff like that. And they gave us a huge front spot. And this I have in the presentation. You could probably bring up the screenshots there. But big spot. So on your iPhone, when you pull it up, you go to the Today tab. That's first. If you go over one tab to the Games tab, because they have apps and games separately. So just the Games screen, they have all the games, and then on top is like like the header games that you can scroll left, right. We were the top one on the left, which means first. Like the first thing you pulled up when you pulled out your iPhone, our launch weekend was Where Shadows Slumber, and then a cool picture of one of the cutscenes.
That's good.
You had to scroll over more if you want to see the other ones. Like I think Monster Hunter had a sale that night, so that was like really awesome. So bittersweet. That was our best weekend of sales. I think that's still our best weekend of sales. So our best time period of sales. I could look at the actual chart itself, but nothing really ever compared to that because that's being like featured by Apple on, I don't know if that was international or just America. I could actually look at like the territory of sales. I'm looking at that now. Yeah, most of those sales were US and Canada. So for that period, it was something crazy like, we hit $10,000 in sales in 2 days.
Wow.
That's the power of being featured. Now, here's the problem.
That makes sense.
If you look at the graph, it almost looks like a skyscraper in a city that doesn't have houses, right? So it's just, here's that big tower of sales. Once you go off of that main page, it's a really steep drop off, and then there's no way to sort of keep you in the limelight. So I even have a screenshot of when we were like #1 on the puzzle charts. Again, that's probably America. It's not international, but like higher than Monument Valley. But here's the thing. It's a constant popularity contest. It's like, who's homecoming queen today, this hour of today, right? So you can beat Monument Valley for a weekend, but they're gonna come back just because of like, I guess a certain number of people downloading it per day or whatever it is. So the short version is, and I'm kind of rambling here, but the short version is our premium game had that nice initial sales launch, but it hasn't really had any gas in the tank going forward. And so we've kind of been surviving on just Apple features. Sometimes we'll get like, we can cause a little bump by putting the game on sale. So like it was $5, put it down to like $2.99 or $1.99, a nice little bump. But for the most part, we're kind of at the mercy of like being featured in an Apple article or is there anything else besides that? We were Game of the Day in December. That was great. Another huge bump in the graph. Let's see if I find December here. Yeah, that was a weekend where we made like $2,000 just by being featured that day. And by the way, when I say these numbers, that's before Apple takes their cut. So it ends up, I mean, I am not complaining because I realized that Where Shadows Slumber did something a lot of indie games can't do, which is we made back the financial investment. Now, you can never really make back the time, right? I mean, Jack's like working on the game in the morning, then he goes to his real job, then he comes home and works more on the game for like 3 years. Like, can't give him that time back, right? And I feel bad about that. That's the kind of thing where I thought to myself, like, okay, the game's going to make $10 million, and then he gets a ton of money, right? Like, that's a pretty good plan, but it didn't work that way. So, I could say, like, sure, we spent $27,000 in a few years on all the trips and all the shows and all the internet ads and buttons and cards. We made that money back. That's fine. But, as for how much money actually goes into pockets of developers, it's very small.
Sure.
So yeah. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Yeah. You just brought up kind of your expenses, which is something that in the talk.
Yeah, we had that on the PowerPoint. Yeah. We had. I think. Did I have both years here? I think I showed off. Which year am I looking at? This must be 2017. Yeah, 2017 to 2018. Yeah.
I'd love you to talk more about that because I think that when this discussion comes up, which it doesn't come up enough, or at least an honest discussion about this does not come up enough. A lot of it's based on revenue. It's based on how much you're making and not the balance between revenue and expense,
Yes,
which is kind of the entire thing. Is how much
exactly.
you're putting in. So dive into your kind of your expenses and how that worked.
Sure. So 2016, 2017, 2018. You could also put 2015 in there. The expenses in 2015 and 2016 were negligible because this project was still like a thing we were working on, kind of a passion project. Will I work on it? Will I not? I'm also working on this board game, Mr. Game. Okay. 2017 and 2018 were the years where Jack and I were like, okay, this is seriously really happening. Like, let's do this. So I didn't even include the 2016 numbers. It was maybe $400
Right.
because we went to GameCon that year, I think. So the total for 2017 and 2018, as of this writing, back at PAX, 25,500, 25,600. 25 grand. So and looking at it, I would say the most expensive things by far, like the big spikes in this graph, are traveling and hiring people. Hiring people makes sense, right? Like I said, Jack and I started this, but a few years into the project, maybe when we were like over a year from launch, we had to bring on a sound team, right?
Sure.
We had to bring on Alba Toramoka and Noah Kelman. They have their own, like, I guess, music studio called Foss. PHO with an umlaut Z. They're fantastic. In fact, if you go to their website, Fossland, where Shadow Slumber is the first like project that they feature, they loved working on the game. I'm really proud of them. They loved like the game itself. They did a great job with the music, but we had to pay them money because they weren't really like at the table with me and Jack when Jack came up with the idea. You know what I mean?
And
we brought them on.
And you need sound. Like you need that. Exactly. That's part of the game that you need to create.
And I promise you, the actual plan coming off of our 2016 demo was that I was going to do the sound just because we were like, what the hell? Why not? Right? I was literally going to take a stupid, a very good field cam, field microphone thing and try to do all the sound effects. And for music, we were just going to be like, snow music, or I was going to be like, should I learn the piano? Terrible idea. So I think it was a good investment to pay whatever we paid them. And we gave them some money, we gave them the equity too. Like it was kind of a mix. It was definitely worth it because everyone talks about how great the audio is, and we can sell the soundtrack now. Right. That's a big spike in the graph, and so like that's something to think about for indies. I always tell people this, like, you are not going to have a lot of success if you just make video games with your friends, because it's very likely that like you're a programmer, your friend is a programmer, your other buddy is like not a great programmer, your fourth friend you just like hanging out with, and it's like maybe we'll just make a game so we can hang out all the time. Like no, that's not really a good team because you don't have complementary skills. Like Jack and I complement each other.
Right.
I'm a good artist, he's a good programmer, he's a mathematician, and I always say that his art is as bad as my code, right? So that's how we knew, but both of our sound was terrible. Like we wouldn't even know what we're doing. And so they complemented our skill set because like they just said something that we couldn't have even done.
Right.
So that's where, we definitely had to hire them, and it was worth it. Now for travel.
Yeah.
Travel's going to be your other big expensive thing. And so now what I'm trying to do more is like limit the amount of, not international, but America is such a big country. Like traveling to California feels like going to another state, right? Another state's another word for country. So it's pretty far. As an indie, if you can survive on the things in your area, you really ought to. So like a play crafting show in the city is, what does it take to get on the subway? $50 for a table. That's a great deal.
Right.
If you're paying $2,000 for a booth somewhere else, and you're flying there, and you're paying for your hotel for not just Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but probably Thursday because you got to set up, and probably Monday because you might not leave on Sunday.
Right.
So it's like a week of hotel and flights for your whole team. How big is your team? Our most expensive show was South by Southwest, and it was $4,000. And they paid for our booth.
Wow.
So like the $4,000 was just like getting there and
being travel there. And room and board.
Crazy. It's crazy. And I sorry, frog in my throat. I have all the expenses on our blog at GameRevenant.com. If you want to see the spreadsheet, I'm kind of just giving you like I'm kind of just giving you the gist here.
Yeah.
Everything else was fine. It was like the amount of money you'd expect to pay. Like an accountant, they get some money for like swag you'd hand out, but that's not going to break your bank. What's going to break your bank is like, I really want to do PAX East, but I have to pay for a booth and I have to get to Boston and I have to stay in Boston. Like that's where you're going to die. And so I've been cutting costs with Airbnb. Airbnb is great. I've also just been trying to cut costs by doing things way in advance. So like at the moment of recording right now, I don't know if I'm going to get into PAX West, but I'm going to get an Airbnb because I can cancel it. I don't care.
Right.
You know, if you stay on top of these things, I could get my flight to Seattle now. And then if they tell me, hey, you got into PAX 10 or hey, you got into the, indie mini booth, you're good. I won't be paying premium prices because why should I? If I know now that I can go, I might as well book it. Now you could also just say like, maybe it's not worth it to spend this much money to travel anyway. I don't know. It's very hard to quantify being in a different location for 3 full days and shilling your game to strangers. I don't know. I mean, it's possible you never make that money back. Or maybe that's like, it's not something that you should look at and say like, am I going to make this back dollar for cents? Like, it's a tough one.
I've heard from a lot of developers, just to kind of add to that events like PAX are more valuable for the connections you make and the conversations you have than necessarily I sold X units.
You're right. Yeah. And I'm finally kind of realizing that even though I've been at this for a while, like I'm kind of shy at these things, but I've been trying to broaden out a bit more. And I think that's definitely right. Like we had a great conversation at PAX East, well, with you, but also with someone that works in mobile games at like DraftKings or something. And we were talking for like a half hour at our booth, like during one of the mornings. And he gave us like a great idea for something else we can do. And maybe I should bring it up at the end, like in the going forward section. But we just had a great talk with this guy. And like I don't care if he bought the game. Like I don't need his $3.99 or whatever. It was really for that experience. And yeah, developers you meet. I think if you want to take a mercenary approach, you could say the best value at these shows is if you get your booth paid for. Going to these shows is a good way to meet people who may front the cost for you later. So like build a good relationship with Unity in 2018.
Sure.
Maybe in 2020 you're in their showcase and you just got to go to GDC for free.
Right.
I don't know if that's actually how they work. I'm just saying generally. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
But in general with expenses, it does seem like people don't want to talk about it because that's sort of that's not the fun part. It's not the sexy part.
It's not making games. It's doing business.
Exactly, and which is something that I should have realized when I started my own studio, and I'm slowly acclimating to it. But there's a lot of there's a lot of things that just aren't fun. And I think if I had an unlimited supply of resources, I think two of the people I would hire is like a business manager who's not me and a marketing professional who is not me to do these things that frankly I don't have a passion for. I want to make games. I want to come up with cool, fun ideas. I love testing my ideas, and that I find that fun. Like some people hate that, but I like testing because it's my idea. I want to see if it sucks.
Sure.
But like filling out state tax forms, God,
that's not
horrible.
Your favorite thing to do in the world. So moving from talking about the expenses, you've already kind of touched on revenue, but is there anything that kind of sticks out as a surprise in the whole revenue stream, maybe about localization or something like that?
Oh, localization is good point. I wasn't going to bring that up actually, but you're right. Well, so first with the revenue, I'm looking at the App Store Connect thing right now. To date, like I have the thing that says last 365 days. For sales, it says 44,600K. They never give you exact numbers because Apple is very weird. So that's almost $45,000, but proceeds is 29,600. So like close to 30 grand. And proceeds is what you really care about because proceeds is like the money Apple will deposit into your bank. So that's sort of, and I realize that's better than a lot of indies do. It's not stratospheric levels of money like you dream when you put your app on the store, but it's good. I think it's good for like our first real commercial effort, I guess I kind of just wish we could have made the game faster so we could get to this point sooner and go to the next game. But
that's another good point. And I think that's another thing that has come up a lot lately in my conversations with dev is about shortening production time and that being kind of key to having continual success financially.
Right. Yeah, because like I said, you can't get the time back, right? So if you could do what we did in a shorter amount of time, and I don't think you could, but if you could, then yeah, you'd automatically have a better return.
Right.
As far as localization, that's a great question. We translated this app into like 11 other languages, but it's also the kind of game that doesn't really need text or have a lot of text.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. It's very difficult to tell if that strategy actually paid off, because we haven't really done a ton of international sales. The majority seems to be US and Canada. And also, like, I don't know, like, are the Canadian people French Canadian? They speak English.
Right,
Like, it's half and half in Canada.
Sure, that's true.
You don't really know. I don't have the data to say, like, these Canadian people. Oh, but Canada's also, like, only just over $1,000. That's really not a lot. And then if you look at Europe, Europe seems to be mainly the United Kingdom at over 4,000, and then all the other ones are like $2,000 in Germany, 1,500 in France, but not a crazy amount. I guess what I was assuming is that. Oh, and by the way, those people might also just speak English, right? Because everyone speaks English.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if they're really coming to it because it's like, this is in Dutch. Great, I'm Dutch. Yeah, it's not obvious to me that strategy mattered in the long run. It also, I wouldn't say it took up too much time or money to translate, but well, I guess it is a hassle to manage all those languages. And Jack would probably say, like, the fact that he had to make sure that every text box could contain every variation of that word was a pain. Like, I think if I was working on something like Skyrim, I don't know, with so much text in there, I don't know if I'd bother translating it from English because there's just so many people that know English, and who knows? Does it really pay to translate? I'm not sure. I went into this thinking that was a surprise. I went into it thinking, like, okay, because it's available in all these languages, if we make $10,000 in the English market, it'll be 10,000 in the French market, right? It'll be the same, 10,000 German, 10,000 whatever. It's not what the graph looks like. So I don't know. Maybe don't worry about it. Maybe consider it as something that can happen later. Now, the other reason we did that, though, is because we got good advice that said you are more likely to be featured by Apple if you're available in all these languages.
That's a good bit of information.
And the thing about the Apple feature is we got it, and I don't have access to the alternate timeline where we didn't get it. So I don't know. Could we have gotten that feature if we released a year ago and also we're only in English? And when we submitted the thing, we flipped on the bird. Like, I don't know. Like, they're like, screw you, Apple. Feature it. We're like, you kids, we'll do it. I don't know.
And of course, all of this is based on your specific experience, but it's all great information. You know, I'm really hoping that people that are interested in doing mobile development are going to run across this, and it's going to give them some sort of idea of what they might be getting into.
Definitely. Just one last point on that. I think that might also be why some people don't share their experience. Like, okay, one reason why you might not want to share your experience is because maybe you spent a lot of money, you didn't make a lot of money, and you're just embarrassed because your game didn't do well. And okay, fair enough. But I think sometimes people are afraid to share their numbers because they think, like, well, I know how data works, I know how science works. You need a sample size of like 2,000. I'm just one person. Why bother? And it's like, well, listen, you don't have access to that data anyway, so don't worry about it. And also, we'll never get that sample size unless 100 indie developers publish their numbers, right? So, like, you got to contribute to the pool of information, or no one will do it. And this, Jack and I were kind of talking about that too. I was like, we're going to do this panel, we're going to show off our numbers, and he said, like, well, this is misleading, right? Because you're advertising that it's what premium indie games really make. You're getting people in to see the panel, but they're just going to see our numbers. So is it dishonest to advertise that? Which is a good point, right? So that's why I did my best to get other indie developers to share their experience. And we had a panel full of people. And then I went online to find other people's numbers, and I was disappointed to find that it's like Monument Valley has their revenue, not expenses, not profit, but revenue. And there's a game called A Dark Room that made about $800,000. Which is crazy, right? But that's when I realized that, like, people don't publish their numbers unless they did super well, and they could brag about it, right? It's like it's not often that people brag about all the money they didn't make, which is not really what I'm doing. But yeah, so that could be another reason why you won't find a lot of people giving specific information, or maybe they're just not as organized as I am, and they don't have that information at their disposal. Now, I had to do this for taxes, so I don't know what some of these other people are doing. If you don't know how much money you spent, then you're not getting the write-offs you could on your taxes, everybody.
Them write-offs. I think I think the next thing that would be pertinent to talk about is probably something that's on the minds of a lot of people that are thinking about mobile development. That's iOS versus Android.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you talked about uh, basically everything Apple now, which I think probably leads a bit to the result of the question. But how do Apple and Android compare?
Yeah, so two things I guess I would say quickly is that Android, it's a bit tougher on Android to get your stats in a way that's helpful to show off.
Mm.
Like the graph they give you is a little weird, and there's a button you can press in the Google dashboard that's like, I want transaction history, and it just spits out this awful spreadsheet for you that's not helpful because it's literally like this person purchased your game, then they got a refund on their own and canceled and rescinded. Like all those records are there, so it's not helpful for figuring out like how much money
Sure.
you made. Android looks to be around $4,000 in the time it's been released, which is a fraction of iOS. Now you might say, well, that's because everyone got it on iOS first. Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. So yeah, I guess all told, if you added Android and iOS together, we're close to 50 grand in like sales, but not proceeds.
Mm.
Remember? So like, that's the number before Google and Apple kind of take their cut. So it definitely seems like less. My hunch about Android is that people are looking for free stuff, and that I guess that just means, and we'll talk about this later. Like, is there a way to get Where Shadows Slumber out to that community? In a way that's maybe a bit more freemium, just to kind of play their game a little bit, because they like the game, but maybe they're just spooked by the paywall, and that's the premium problem. Is that like in a culture of try before you buy, you're kind of just hampering yourself if you put a paywall up there, and that's something that I would have been pretty stubborn about that before we launched, but now that I see it, I'm like, well, listen, I mean, the example I like to use is like, everyone thinks that car accidents or houses burning down, like that's something that happens to other people. Sometimes you need to see your house burning down to be like, oh, my house can burn down. I didn't realize that. So my house, okay, so it's burning down. Got it. And that's my house. Like, and that's kind of the experience of releasing your game on on these platforms with certain ideas about how the market will react.
Yeah.
And then the answer,
Sure.
and you're like, okay, yeah, that's my house burned down. Got it. So yeah, it does seem like, I guess I'm disappointed with how Android's performed, but I'm also disappointed with iOS. Like I want like $1 million, man. So I could say I'm disappointed about a $40,000 gap, but that's kind of like beside the point.
Right.
So we're going to work on that. Now the strange thing about Android is that we had like a weird development cycle. We launched a demo of the game that was actually just like all we had done at that point. So it wasn't really a demo. It was like, here's what we have so far. And that was back in 2016 at the very end of the year. And to date on Android, that has gotten over 300,000 downloads.
Wow.
But it was free. It's a free demo.
Right.
So I think, yeah, and very high ratings, 6,000 ratings. It's a solid, like close to 5 score, like 4.8 or whatever, like where you want to be. So, I guess I can jump ahead to this now rather than saving it in because I keep hinting at it. So I'm like, I should just say it. Something Jack and I were considering when we were at PAX East, and we talked to that DraftKings guy, and we saw how our demo did on Android when it was free, and we took a look at the market. We were like, okay, it may be possible that we could keep Where Shadows Slumber on the store as a premium purchase, a $3 game, and also have another app on the store that is also Where Shadows Slumber, call it like Where Shadows Slumber free, and let people in the door for free, and then hit them with a paywall like after a few levels, or hit them with multiple paywalls, which is like an effort we don't really feel like doing. Because like if I could choose between getting my game on Switch or getting my game on Android again, why would I do that? But
Right.
If it's possible to sort of take what we've already spent a lot of time on, do a little bit of tweaking, repackage it, put it back out to the market, and say like, okay, would you like it this way? Then maybe that'll work. I don't have any data on that yet. We've kind of just barely begun the process of like getting it out there. But it's possible that sometime later this year, you'll see 2 entries on the store, one that costs $3 and one that seems to cost nothing but has paywalls inside of it. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just hoping that like all the people that loved our Android demo and are still downloading it somehow, like I don't know how they keep finding it, But I'm hoping that community of people will see this freemium version and say, okay, now that's something I can share and I could go crazy on and I could leave good reviews. Because I mean, once people can download it, they can leave a rating.
Sure.
Even if they like the first 10 levels, but they don't want to buy it, if they can give us a thumbs up, that's going to help us later on down the road. And I think if we do that experiment, we're probably going to do it on iOS and Android, but I would do it on Android first.
Yeah.
Um,
And
sorry.
I think you've really hit it, at least on the meat of what I saw at this talk, is kind of that eternal balance between premium versus freemium.
Yeah.
And you know, it seemed to me that Katie Naraki and Adriano Valle, two of the other panelists, along with Dan Butchko, were really saying like free's the way to go.
Definitely.
And I have a lot of respect for you guys in sticking with your vision, but I think you probably you wouldn't do it the same way if you were doing it again from scratch, would you?
That's true. You're absolutely right. I think on the one hand, I don't know if I would make another game like Where Shadows Slumber that's kind of
Sure.
a sequential experience that ends. Because if it ends, you can't really update it and keep it
True.
It's kind of like how in politics the news cycle goes so fast. Like there's a scandal, and then you don't hear about that guy for a while, and people forget about it. It's like scandal's gone. If you think of your game like a scandal, it's like you got to keep having revelations, otherwise
Right.
it's not going to stay in the news. And that's what DLC does for you. So on the one hand, yeah, like if I do more apps or games, they'll definitely be free to download, just because like why the heck not? And then as far as the business model, like I've never been a fan of loot boxes or ads. I think those things are pretty scummy. So I would find some other way to make money. But yeah, like trying to get people to just like swipe their credit card, it's tough. It's just tough. It's like how it's hard to get people to buy music. It's getting that way for games. And Kati, I think, took the most pessimistic approach. She said, you're not going to get people to pay money. I trust her because she works at a mobile studio.
Right.
She's obviously had more experience with us. So I think that may unfortunately be the correct way to view it. Now I get frustrated because like I know that Elder Scrolls Blades made $500,000 on its first day, and I also know that I'm not really enjoying it that much. And so like I'm just thinking like, are there really people that paid money for gems so they could spend their gems on treasure chests that take an hour to open? But if you spend your gems, they open up right away and you get random loot. It's like, man, is that truly human nature? Are we truly so fallen? But so that I wouldn't do a game like that, obviously, because I don't want to make anything that doesn't respect people's time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the game development equivalent of waking up and being able to look at yourself in the mirror in a way.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
That kind of vibe. Yeah. Maybe it's not the job that's making you the most money, but it's like I feel good about the way we did this, and that's an interesting balance. And I've run into other indie devs, not necessarily in the mobile market, but in designing games, and it's something that a lot of indies struggle with. It's like this is the game I want to make, but I know that I could make it a different way and make more money. And I mean, I think that's kind of the heart of indie development. Is like you're making the game the way you want to make it. That's not necessarily going to make you the big bucks.
Yeah, so you do pay a price,
and that's okay. Like
right.
That's
Did
one
you
thing.
Go
ahead. Sorry.
Did you have a chance to talk with Kati at all about her story with Mama Hawk?
I've talked with Kati before. I didn't talk to her after that. We did an interview.
Yeah.
Doobly doo here. With Kati and Andrew about Mama Hawk.
And did they tell you the whole thing about how they had to change the experience? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Now we did not do that for Where Shadows Slumber, and I'm not sure how much money they actually made on it. Like if they would say it paid off, but I could say that we definitely made the game we wanted to make, and that is a good thing. Like when Jack pitched this idea, he said like, "Well, Monument Valley's so awesome, and I have this like shadow idea. Like, do you think it's possible? Like, could you kind of see what I'm thinking? Like, I pictured this in my mind. We both pictured this, and we made it. Like, Where Shadow Slumber is definitely that game we were thinking of in 2014, which is really cool to say because a lot of people don't get there, maybe just because for good reasons. Like they had an idea and then they totally switch gears, which is fine. Like there's a Moby Dick card game that is super cool. It was like on Kickstarter. And when that team first began their process, they were going to make a video game where you were actually hunting whales. And they were like, yeah, it's just too hard to make water. So we made a card game. Like, what? Okay. But
All
that
right.
didn't happen. That didn't happen
Pivot.
with us. We really didn't have that pivot. We knew it was going to be this mobile focused game, kind of like Monument Valley. It has this cool shadow mechanic. It was still called Light Shadow Game at the time. It wasn't Where Shadows Slumber. But we stuck with the vision. Yeah. And so I think now, like, my advice for indies would be to try to, if it's going to be something that you do for money, like video games for money, I think it's good to think of how much money you would need per year and work backwards from there. Like, it doesn't, like, you know, the indie dream I had when I started Where Shadows Slumber was, hey, Monument Valley, what, they make $14 million? Okay, so we make that, we do that, we also make $14 million, and then we just spread it across less people. But that's unrealistic, right? That's assuming you hit jackpot. What you could also say is, like, okay, software developer makes like 70 grand a year. So starting on January 1st of 2020, what are the things I could do as a game developer that would end up getting me that amount of money in particular? And that's how I survive. Now, that's if you just have to sustain yourself or your family. Maybe it's more than that, depending on where you live in the country. But, like, you know, there's client work you can do. There's contract work. You could just design a game that's meant to make money if you feel okay with that. But you should know, yeah, if you make the game you set out to make the way you want to make it to a market of people that isn't necessarily plentiful or buying a lot. Like, I don't know if there's a lot of premium customers out there, then that's what's going to happen.
Right.
One way I think it's really cool that I've heard some people doing in the mobile space is, like, you make money from sponsors, but not ads. And so you're really never charging the user anything. You're also not doing these quick little banner ads. There's like some sports game I heard of a year or so back where all of his money was made from big ticket advertisers, and he was putting their products directly into the game, not in a hidden way, in a very obvious way.
Like you bought Nike shoes as an upgrade
exactly
or something like that. Oh,
exactly.
That's clever.
Because it was a winter sports, like, Olympics game, so it was like snowboarding, skiing, and also like driving a car in the snow. So literally, like, one of his sponsors was Kia or something, and they were like, hey, we got that Kia 2020. He's like, boom, it's in the game, you know. And now, how is he making money? They were paying him maybe like $1 million a year. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you do that, you can make whatever amount of money it is per year. You obviously have to tailor it to those sponsors. Maybe some people don't like that, but then the user doesn't see any charge at all. And from my experience of Where Shadows Slumber, the moment they do see a charge, they're going to probably turn around and turn tail. Like, the number of impressions our game got when it was featured on the store was ridiculous. You know, it was such a high number. The amount of people who actually converted to sales, quite low. So yeah, I feel different about it, but I'm not jaded. It's actually, to me, it's an exciting challenge. It's like, I think you do your best design when you're put into, like, these very specific restrictions. And so now the restriction for me going forward is like, okay, I know the things I don't want to do in the mobile space. I also know there's some things I can't do because they won't make money. So it's like, how do I make a game that I still enjoy and I feel like respects the human dignity of the player, but also could be a commercial success? And I think that's a fascinating challenge. And that's a better challenge for designers than to just hit your head against a wall like I did when I made this game and saying, like, well, I don't care if the market has moved. I'm doing this anyway. You know, I think it's a more interesting challenge. So we all got to step up.
I think that's a pretty good capstone to the conversation, kind of as a conclusion. Thank you, really sincerely, for being so honest.
Sure.
Like we've said, this isn't something that's out there a lot. I mean, in some cases, I think that also has to do with people's contracts and that.
Yes.
But it's my hope that maybe this will encourage some other people to share their stories. And if you're watching this and you want a place to tell it, then please just message us. That's our whole point of what we do at Indie Hangover.
Awesome.
So, hey, Frank, thanks again for sharing. And like we said, there'll be a link to Where Shadows Slumber down below if you would like to.
Definitely. We should put the blog on there too, because we'll keep the honesty rolling as we talk about what it's like to get on PC and Switch if we do Switch. And also, if we end up doing this experiment where we put a free version of Where Shadows Slumber out there with different different paywalls, we'll have data on that once it's out. So that will be it'll be really interesting to come back like a year after our premium launch and see like, oh, well, how did that free one do? Like, how does it compare? So
That'd be great.
GameRevenant.com, we blog every Tuesday. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's an awesome blog to follow. You guys have put on some great stuff. So
thank you.